Introduction, Joe. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. My name is Travis Reeves. Madeline has passed the baton to me today for this beer tasting, but she is on as well, and we'll introduce at the end our upcoming wine tasting. With Plum Market, my focus right now is e-commerce, but kind of jack of all trades, helping a lot of different things, and anything alcohol related is an interest of mine. So Tom and Pauline and I have worked together before, and we're excited to have this tasting here. Pauline is the sales director, and Tom's a Metro Detroit Liberator. And then the man himself, Joe Short, who's founder and creative mastermind. He's going to be guiding us through the lineup tonight, which is in the chat room, and sharing some really fun stories with us, I'm sure. This is our first virtual beer tasting, as I mentioned. So welcome, everybody. Some of you I know from the wine tastings, and we have, I think, a couple new faces here as well. So, and Chicago's here with us too. So thank you for joining us, Chicago. Just remember to keep yourselves on mute, and speaker view is good if you want to watch the shared pictures as well as see who's talking at the same time. And you can just put any questions in the chat room, and we'll kind of feed them to Joe as we go, or finish them up at the end. So without further ado, we have a quick, actually, intro video. Pauline, if you'd like to start that, and then we'll get things started off. Little social, cheers.
Detroit Liberator or Beer Liberator?
Well, I think that kind of sets the tone. You guys are clearly a fun place.
Very nice.
So Joe, do you want to introduce our first beer here, or seltzer rather?
Absolutely. I had to modify my view here so I could make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to the first beer version of this event. Honored to be the inaugural here. So if you are not aware of our original beer recipe, Soft Parade, it's one of the beers that have made us kind of famous in Michigan and through other various beer geekery portions of the world. But I originally created Soft Parade because at our small little brew pub in Bel Air, we wanted to offer something to people who weren't really interested in beer. So Soft Parade became the beer for people who don't like beer, but also a beer for people who do like beer. So essentially the gateway for a lot of potentially maybe nervous Nellies about craft brew, or somebody who just wasn't interested in beer, but might be looking for a wine or a cocktail. So the idea was to make a very fruit-forward beer and use fresh fruit, 1 pound of fruit per gallon. And with this version of the Soft Parade Seltzer is a lot like the original beer recipe, with the exception of essentially malt and hops. When we make seltzer, it's pretty much just water and sugar, which is what gives us our alcohol. And of course, we use 1 pound of fruit per gallon, real aseptic puree, which gives it this really lovely, almost pinkish purplish color. And because it's seltzer is so clean, it's very appropriate to have it in the Refreshin session, because it's kind of like flavored sparkling water, really. kind of the Kool-Aid mixed with sparkling water. And I can't pick out any particular fruit, so to me it's almost like a berry blend or mixed berry type beverage. Very clean, refreshing, probably dangerous to have on the weather like we've been having these past few days.
Yeah, it's very drinkable. And we noted earlier it's 5.5 ABV, which is a little higher than some of the other seltzers. But just like Soft Parade beer itself is kind of deceiving.
Yeah, I would say so for sure. You really don't, I don't anyway, pick up any of the alcohol. I saw a comment in there, it's dry, strawberry in the nose. Admittedly, I'm not a super smeller or super taster like my wife. So if you're picking up stuff, please let me know because it'll help me describe it better when I'm doing other tastings.
My wife is the better palate as well.
I always lean to women. They seem to have a more finite palate. It's too easy. Mixed berry is a great description. So, yeah.
I've heard winemakers say that they think, if they're gentlemen, that their female partners have better palates, but all the guys I know in the wine business have killer palates. So I think it's 6 of one or half a dozen of the other. I would just weigh in on this is dangerous. It's too easy. And you know what? Your description of mixed berry is bang on the money.
Yeah, there's no one that stands out in particular to me. Yeah, this is just crazy, crazy quaffable. I'm excited to hear some feedback from how it does it with the rest of the pack. And I think it adds a nice diversity to the rest of the pack too. So it's not quite beer, but it's inspired by one of our beers.
Yeah, actually speaking on the beer too, Joe, could you clarify a little something? There's a lot of different rumors and such of the ABV stories with Soft Parade as it's changed over the years. And actually, I don't think currently it's designated on the label. Could you elaborate on that?
I can elaborate on the original ABV and I guess, the folklore behind some of the other ABVs. Pauline may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but it should be on the label now, right? Okay. So it's always been around 7.5, 7.7. But I'm going to rewind back to like 2005, late 2004, where when we did it originally, the original recipe was still 1 pound of fruit per gallon, but it was IQF fruit, which means individual quick froze fruit. So it's the closest thing you can get to real fruit off the vine. And if anybody here knows anything about real fruit, there's a ton of water in real fruit. This did not occur to me at the time. But I think what's even more interesting is how we process this fruit. So think about your typical household blender. Holds about a quart, right? So imagine pumping 200 pounds of fruit through one of those things for every batch of Soft Parade. We would mix a little wort in there and emulsify the fruit and pour it in. And so when the beer, so before we added the fruit, because that was dumped into the fermenter, right? And the wort was still in the kettle before that get pumped into the fermenter to blend with the pureed fruit. We took a reading, and this is like old school brewer's math. The original gravity and final gravity, you do a quick math equation and you end up with the alcohol by volume. That was always around 7.5%. But then I'm thinking, well, I did just add a bunch of fruit, which is going to add more fermentable. So I should just kind of pad the ABV up a little bit. So I don't know if I wrote 9 or 8. I never wrote 10. I could promise you that. I've never wrote anything north of 10. But then what I realized too is that all that additional fermentable we added pretty much was neutralized by all the water that was with that additional fermentable. So it was kind of a net zero gain. So really we're back to 7.5% ABV. And later on, this theory would be confirmed when we have a lab that we test all of our products in now. But yeah, so that's how, and of course, being in the rural area that we're at, you know, anybody that sees like a 9% fruit beer on the board that gets caught off guard by enjoying 2 or 3, you know, then quickly legends start to grow. And, you know, I've heard anywhere from 10 to 20%, and it was all made in a bathtub and things like that. But
jungle
really,
juice, right?
but really, it was just in our early years, it was brewers guessing math. And then we actually did a double version, much like what we did here just recently, which helped perpetuate the folklore behind the original ABV, which didn't help. And I was really worried that was going to happen again this last time, but it didn't. People were stoked, and so that's kind of the story. I'm not sure if that answers some of the questions, but that's my version.
Great.
Always a fun one to tell.
Well, I don't know if you want to get into the locals next, or maybe touch on a little bit of your home brewing that brought this whole Shorts brewing to fruition.
Yeah, so I stumbled into home brewing as a 19-year-old do-it-yourselfer, and at 19 years old, I probably looked more like I was 14 or 15. So even if I had like the best fake ID in the world, I was never really gonna successfully buy alcohol. But I found a loophole, which meant that if I bought malted barley, hops, and yeast, and had a couple buckets and a big kitchen pot, I could probably create my own beer. And that intrigued me a lot. So
Probably made you some good friends at that age.
Sorry, what?
Probably made you some good friends at that age too, I'd imagine.
Well, I was really hoping to, you know, add to the cool factor too. Like if I made good drinkable beer, it would just enhance any remote possibility that I might be cool someday. So through this process of trying to teach myself how to make beer, I failed so many times. It was just a horrible defeat after defeat after defeat. And so I was not really willing to throw in the towel until I could actually produce something that was drinkable. And at some point along the lines, everything kind of clicked, and I was really starting to dial in the brewing process. And not only was I making pretty good beer, it was really good beer. And that really just kind of engrossed me and kind of captured every spare moment of my time and imagination. And I really dedicated a lot of my junior year to making beer, which is the same year I turned 21. And I did not return to school that 4th year because I decided now is the time to get it out of my system. If I was going to be a brewer, do something that you want to, you know, do something that you enjoy for a career. So I really wanted to honor that philosophy and pursue the art of brewing. And, you know, here we are 23 years later. So kind of cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so that was a 24-year-old Joe.
Like you said, 14, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, 24. Here he looks like he's 18.
So you kind of understand where I'm coming from here. But yeah, that was during a capital raise campaign. So I had already, I'm in the building that the pub is in now. And then I was trying to raise more capital because we changed the use of the building. It went from like a $30,000 project to a $250,000 project. And the classic Cinderella story, you know, we put it together with shoestrings and duct tape and good old fashioned tenacity and a little bit of luck. And now we're Shorts is the Michigan's third largest brewery, and that's something that we're really proud of, especially considering our humble beginnings in the remote, charming community of Bel Air, Michigan.
Awesome. Do you want to introduce the Locals Light now?
Yes, I do. Before I get too excited about this soft grade seltzer. So I've been telling a really fun story about this beer recently. I think I've done over 2 different video interviews. And I can start with that story if you like.
Please.
Okay, so first off, so Locals Light. So this is the quintessential classic American light lager. And if you ask anybody what they think beer looks or tastes like, they will, 90% of the time, they will probably highlight this style. And so that, again, pays homage to our humble beginnings when we set up shop at a demographic where people were relatively concerned and scared about anything outside of this style. So I made this beer because I wanted the everyday person to have a beer that they could identify with. And this is still the best-selling beer in the pub today.
Wow.
But I'm talking about people like my grandparents, like my dad, people who don't drink IPAs or stouts or fruit beers.
They're out in the boat and in the bay there.
Yeah, I was really trying to appeal to my Busch Light loving family members to some degree. But we call this beer in its simplest form because really that's what it is. It's not triple dry hopped. It doesn't have any other adjuncts like fruit or spices. It's pale blonde malt, water, yeast, and hops. Very little bitterness. And I love this beer because it's got a great story from where it started. So it started at the pub, and it was like the gateway for craft brew for a lot of domestic beer drinkers, and it was a little heartier, a little more wholesome. So now, I kind of like to describe it as it's the best beer for the best price in its class. Like you can't find in my opinion, I haven't found anything that's comparable.
I actually blind tasting it. I could have sworn that there would have been some corn in there, but I see clearly ingredients, 100% malt, no corn.
No corn. We do use corn in some of the Pilsners, which I do enjoy, but not the straight up American light lager. And industrial lagers are known to use just commodity cereal grains. And these are grains that go from rice to other grains that a lot of people don't even realize exist because
a lot of adjuncts.
It's literally just to press the sugar out. So at some point from our evolution as a draft pub producer, Locals Light, clean, crisp, and refreshing, low carb, many of us love. Yes. At some point from the pub brewing draft to when we transitioned to this packaging brewery behind me here, something got lost in translation, and I wasn't really digging Locals Light anymore. And I find myself really liking the idea of having industrial lager around the house. And one of my favorites was hams. And so I'm having friends over to my house and we're drinking hams because it just sounded right. And then started thinking a little deeper about it. And I'm like, I'm buying hams because I don't like Locals Light. And this is a really bad problem. So I tried to address it through our quality control program, and we came to a point of agree to disagree. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with this beer, Joe. You're crazy. And I'm like, I can't drink this beer. It's gross, but we'll agree to disagree. Then I came up with this idea to create vintage premium lager, which was like the next iteration of Locals Light, but with actual rice syrup. And this was to basically go after like the PBR people of the world. And this beer came off as a huge hit. We did 24 packs for $24 out of Schwarzmart. And people were loving it. They couldn't get enough of it. And then it came to that time where we're like, should we bring this to the production facility and sell it out of the production facility, into the wider Michigan market? And then it was like, well, we already have Locals Light. So which light beer should we actually focus on? And it came down to Locals. We needed to stick with Locals. That was the beer we started with, and most people were connected to it, which led to the quality team conceding and kind of taking a deep dive into what was going on with the beer. And so what we had discovered was that, and because this is such a simple beer, everything is noticeable, right? So there's nothing you can hide in it, like through roasted barley or a lot of hops. If there's something funky or weird about it, you're going to know.
I think that's a really important point for people who don't know brewing. Sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think it's a very important point for people who don't know brewing. Like, a clean lager is so challenging. Any flaw sticks out there like a sore thumb, and you can hide a lot of mistakes in an IPA or a stout or something like that.
Yeah, it's not as easy to overlook in this style. So what we had discovered was that our malt specs, we actually weren't paying attention to a lot of our raw material specs. Again, we were just kind of getting used to the life as production brewers and buying things in bulk. And so we'd never really truly evaluated. And we experienced this similarly with soft parade fruit about 4 years ago. But anyway, so we identified that we were getting not great malt, and we identified that we needed to boil harder and evaporate more. And once we fixed those two things, and then gave it a new look, bam, all of a sudden we created the beer that I've always wanted to have and that I've always wanted to drink for that, quintessential American light lager. And so I'm really proud that we ended up with, what we have now. And it's always fun to tell the story of how we got there. So
can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
First of all, the label is killer. And I just am wondering if you use the same artist. I mean, it's really beautiful. It's and it matches the style of the beer. And then the other, and then I'll let you go, is it's very long. Is that something you pay attention to in beer? I use wine speak. What can I tell you? And a long aftertaste to finish is a good thing if the flavor is delish. So is that something that's valued in beer?
I guess it depends on your preference. But when you say long, you mean like it's got a really resonating aftertaste.
Yeah,
right?
It just keeps going. It doesn't go away,
Yeah, so in some instances, I would say this is relatively lower carbonated than its industrial lager counterparts. And so a lot of that effervescence really assists in washing flavor down. That's why you have to have those ones really cold and drink them fast, in my opinion. But because this is more like real beer, we have a little less carbonation going in there. So you actually get to taste what the beer really is supposed to taste like.
Oh, big time. It's delish.
And yeah, so it does resonate a little bit. It's going to stick around a little longer in your mouth, and there's more filling ingredients in here, so it's not to be like quickly overlooked. It's a great point though. I never would have thought about it like that.
What about
you mentioned the artwork? Pauline's about to show a slide here of a bunch of different labels.
Yeah, so I think going into the vortex of our label design could be a whole separate Zoom event in itself. But if you take a look at like this background, you'll see a combination of what we call graphic art and illustrated art. And Locals Light is more of the graphic art. And we did this in-house with one of our key designers at the time, Jesse Denherder, who was still a great friend of mine and is now working with a great distillery down in Thompsonville called Ironfish. But we worked really long and hard on this to get it to where it's at. And of course, when you design by committee, things can become quite cumbersome. But this is where we landed. This is what felt really good to us. We tried to pull from, to be honest with you, some pre-prohibition beer designs to sort of a modern flow and bring it into a graphic world. And it just really felt good. The original label always had the boats on there, so we knew we needed to keep those. Being surrounded by water and the sunsets is part of the magic of where we live, so we really wanted to make that connection. And then something like just brilliantly distinguishable, which was this baby blue that contrasts so brilliantly with that silver, really makes it pop. So it's got this classic quintessential American beer vibe to it with a sort of a modern twist. I thought Pauline was clapping, but she's really just scratching her hand.
Bravo.
It was like I did good. So yeah, any other questions about locals?
Don't see any in the chat. Should we?
Anybody not like this beer? Because that's okay too. That's why we have a whole variety pack. So you just keep what you want.
Delicious when you, I love Locals Light, but it's really delicious when you add a lime. That is a personal favorite. So great.
I think that goes with any lager beer, though. The only way I was ever to drink Bud Light was the lime version they had at Disney World when I was there with our kids, or Legoland, or wherever we were at. I was like, God, beer selections here suck. But well, I have that Bud Light lime. And it was pretty good.
Pretty tasty.
Yeah, so there you go, Citra Locals, right? So basically add a bunch of citrus, Citra hops, which is basically named after its flavor profile. But so you add citrus to beers, it's wonderful, and that's why Nicey Spicy is one of my favorite beers of all time, specifically in the summer.
I forgot about the Citra one. That was good. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling that'll make a comeback at some point.
Well, should we move on to a little sticky?
I think we
get
should. All right, so
And
I
then- and
still
then
don't
the
know
move
how
too.
they are making these low ABV IPAs taste so good. This is beyond my traditional brewing education, which is self-taught. But I learned a long time ago that I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough to do everything that Shorts Brewing Company needs. And so we have a very talented group of brewers and food scientists and engineers on the team. And they are able to take full flavored beers like Humalupalicious and Sticky Icky Icky and make a micro little baby version of them. And that's what's great about Sticky. For those of us who are wanting to stay active and not fall asleep right away after a full flavored IPA, or drink a few more without, as we get older. I'm 40-ish now. Watch the figure, right? I don't metabolize beer as fast as I used to. Let me put it that way.
Well, you're probably the most fit beer beer brewer I know.
16-ounce curls, sometimes 12-ounce curls, sometimes 20-ounce curls.
So I think as an IPA fan, I think the thing that I'm always looking for in one of these style of beers is making sure that hop profile is still coming out, especially in the nose. So I'm guessing based on the lower ABV, because you have to tone everything down, are you doing a lot of late addition hops?
I wish I could answer that in a really educated way. But if, we really like our IPAs at Shorts. And based on the way that this smells, I'd imagine that we're treating it like any other IPA that we make, where we are doing a very aggressive dry hop. You know, dry hopping doesn't add any alcohol, mostly this aroma that really pops, especially for a guy who, doesn't smell, terribly well. So I can smell it from here, and I'm just loving it. I think the real magic is being able to still bring that much hop into the IPA and have the malt profile that keeps bitterness in check while also keeping the ABV low. Because it's easy to have a boozy IPA because you can really pour a lot of hop into the middle of that without it being scorchingly bitter. I guess that's the other thing, is like we're not trying to create hop tea. We're actually really trying to have a very sophisticated beer that has everything you want in an IPA. The profile of malt, the profile of hop flavor, the profile of hop aroma, and the low ABV, which is kind of like the magic portion of it. I like that little tidbit of history. That's pretty awesome. That's probably why they got so many people to work at the breweries.
Yeah. I figured everybody knew it besides me, but I went ahead and looked it up.
Well, I did hear that that's what the Guinness staff used to be able to do, is have a beer with lunch and then go back to their shift. And of course, Guinness is like 4.3 or something, which is nice. But yeah, I don't get like a lot of that lingering, scorching bitter. Its bitterness is there, but it's not prominent. You know, I think it's really nicely balanced with the malt that's there.
I agree, and I think probably, the standard in Michigan is going to be Founders All Day IPA, and I think this is an excellent alternative option to that. So I think you guys did a great job on it.
Thanks. Yeah. Do we have any IPA drinkers in the house right now? How many wine folks drink IPA?
Wine folks like tannin, so we don't mind slightly bitter, but this one actually, it's got a really neat mouthfeel because the bitterness is actually, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's soft and bitter at the same time. It doesn't pull your attention. It's just part of the picture. It's neat.
I like that.
Yeah.
Soft and bitter.
At the
That's
same
really
time. Is this you lying in the grass?
Oh, if I could only grow a beard. No, that's not. I actually don't know who that is. It's supposed to be Luke.
It's Woj.
Whoa. Oh, Woj. Such a good one.
We have a question from Phil asking Lil Sticky versus Lil Huma. Maybe why you did the switch, or maybe the differences between the two.
I think we're just trying to show off a little bit. Give attention to another IPA that does really well for us, but make a mini baby version of it and put it in the Refreshin session pack, because now Little Huma's kind of in its own SKU. So that's full on like flagship now, but like the spirit of the variety pack is to just keep bringing new stuff through. And I think, and Pauline, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the route we went, because Little Huma was already available, but the Refreshin session needed that hoppy, low ABV, low cal component. And so naturally we just took one of our next best selling IPAs and made the low cal, low ABV version.
It had such a great name. Low hanging fruit.
Right? Sticky.
Well, Joe, you guys have been open. I'm sorry, what was that?
Last time I had this was for a video shoot, and I think I just slammed the whole thing because it was low ABV and delicious. But now that I'm here properly drinking with all of you, I'm really taking it in, and I like it. I think that's for Pauline. Yes, we actually picked spruce tips yesterday, which is exciting. And is spruce going to be a standalone, or is it going to be in the Super Happy Holiday? Yeah, so spruce Pilsner sounds like it'll be on its own, and then Juicy Tree will be in the Super Happy Holidays.
Yeah, so we will do a very special limited batch of Spruce Pilsner that will come out, I believe, at the very beginning of November. And then Juicy Tree will be in our Super Happy Holiday Pack, which will also come out at the beginning of November. And yeah, Joe and Tom were picking spruce tips yesterday, actually.
Tom, did you have any sticky parts of your body that you didn't realize?
My forearms when I got done, because I had gloves on. It wasn't
No, I
bad,
still
but
have
my forearms are just covered.
resin sticking my hair together.
They went foraging.
That's what we're
for the
going for.
spruce
We're going
tips
for that pine
yesterday.
resin.
All right.
They had a bunch of pine resin on their arms.
Oh yeah. All right. So I have
Oh, and real quick, it's also with spruce tips. Exterior illumination is a sour we'll have out this fall/winter that has those same spruce tips in it.
yeah, so we picked 200. Well, we exceeded the harvest by 25 pounds, which means we could do even something more fun. Another spruce beer.
Oh, so Tom, you
Better have
overachieved.
too much than not enough.
Ooh, spruce hop water.
Yeah. My car still smells great from all those 200 pounds of spruce.
Christmas in June.
So,
Tom, you must have been quite efficient out there.
it's roughly par for the course. The last couple of years, we've had some pickers fade out early, which left the bulk of the work for those who wanted to stay. I'm excited that didn't happen this year. But on average, it's about a dozen plus, give or take, people, and we can do about 100 pounds an hour. So we were out of there in about 3 hours, which was awesome. So for this final beer, the Nitro Buddy, I'm gonna go grab an oversized frozen glass because this is how I do this. So I'll be right back.
All right. Now I wish I would have frosted a mug, but for next time.
All right.
Oh, Pauline, I have a question. How are the names picked? Are they done when everyone's having a party and, feeling no pain? Because they're really good.
They are good. And they come out in so many different forms that there is no one way a name comes to be. And anything from music references to everyone getting together and having some beers and creative juices flow, names of people's pets. It is literally across the board. So it is just as diverse as the names are. Actually, well, Joe can tell the story of how we came up with this name, or not necessarily story, but reasoning behind this name.
Happy to. So I've angled my camera so you can see this glass. But the key with Nitro, and the real name of the spear is, Furry Buddy, but we want to make a Nitro version. So the key to Nitro is keep things really cold. And I've got this frozen glass, and I'm going to open the beer. Because I have this much headspace, I'm going to pour it nice and hard in there so all that nitro gets knocked into solution. Making a big old mess. It's handy to have a paper towel over here. I'm not sure if you can see that cascading ever so beautifully.
Yes, we can.
All right. So in my evolution as a beer drinker, an aging beer drinker, I've really started to enjoy, less bitter, more flavor, less alcohol. And I find myself, of course, drinking beers that aren't shorts, like Guinness, which is the gold standard for Nitro Stout. I mean, they've been making beer since the 1800s. Great company. Of course, we're shorts. We should be able to do this. And stouts, Nitro Stouts aren't prevalent in the market yet, but there are a lot of stout fans out there. And so later this fall, we'll be debuting another one of my favorite stouts, which was born from a traditional Irish stout, kind of polished, cleaned up, and moved into a single drop, Pauline?
Yep, it's coming out in October. Super delicious stout.
So this is the precursor to Super Delicious. It's a little lighter in ABV, but just as drinkable. And so Furry Buddy, and someday I want to do a variety pack that has all of our Ween-inspired beers in them. And if you don't know what Ween is a band from New Hope, Pennsylvania. They're one of my favorite musician groups. And all of our pub food menus are inspired by Ween, which Leah and I wrote the menu on the way back from a Ween concert. All right, some Ween fans in the house. It's great. So there's a song called Fluffy, and it's about a dog, but it starts out as Fluffy, Furry Buddy. And there's nothing more fluffy and furry and dark and creamy that I could think of than this beer. So as Pauline mentioned, we do draw a lot of inspiration from music and pop culture, and rightfully so. I mean, it's there to entertain us, and we're, for all intents and purposes, in the entertainment business with food and beverage. And Tom's rocking the Ween Boognish logo back there, which is very timely. So thanks for that, Tom. And so very straightforward, classic stout with nitro. So it adds that cream, and you get that roast, that toast, that little bit of caramel / toffee, and it's just smooth. And a lot of times when my family's having ice cream or cake for dessert, this is what I choose.
So how did you do the nitro without doing, the Guinness widget or something like that? Is it just, go ahead and just explain it if you would.
Yeah, so we had actually been talking about this for years, probably 4 years or more. And as I alluded to earlier, we have an engineer on our staff, Tyler Glaze, who started as a lab intern. So with food science and beer engineering, and with just modern equipment available to us now, what we're using is a nitrogen dropper. So what happens is we have this giant machine that keeps liquid nitrogen cold, and then before the seam goes on, we just basically put nitrogen in the can with the flat beer. It's probably a little bit just slightly carbonated, but we'll dose it. We'll dose the beer with straight up liquid nitrogen before the seam goes on the can. And that's how we do it. Sounds way easier than the widget. I think the widget is cuter than, Uncle Steve's label's pretty rough. A little secret for you. Super Delicious Stout is basically the next iteration of Uncle Steve's. So. But yeah.
All right, that's good.
And this is why I wanted to have this one last, because we started with the berry seltzer, right? Soft grade seltzer, mixed berry, completely kind of different from the beer world. We cleansed our palate with a great American light lager. We shifted gears towards something hoppy and bitter. And then now we're just really, what did Madeline say earlier? Soft. So we're using this like smooth, creamy sort of dessert beer to close out the session. And that's exactly what it is for me. I had 2 of these beers yesterday when it was like 90 degrees out. And I think probably one of the most refreshing beers that I think I've had on a super hot day. So don't be confused that it needs to be dark out or cold to have a stout. This stout we made for exactly that, Refreshin. We're really proud of it, and I'm super proud of this one. It delivers exactly everything that I was always hoping we could do with stout.
Last year when I picked up a 12-pack of the Refreshin session, I saw a stout in there, and I was really in the middle of summer, I'm going to drink a stout, and I tried it. I was like, this totally makes sense. I'm good with this. You know, it was a surprise, a pleasant one.
Yes. So Travis agreed. That's why we did it. And then to the comment that just popped up, not only is Furry Buddy good on its own, but it makes a great black and tan. I use so in order for black and tans to work, the ABV of the beer that this is going on top of needs to be higher. So it floats. So it's a density thing. And actually in this pack, it's the inverse if you use Little Sticky. So Little Sticky floats on Furry Buddy, I believe, in this pack. But Space Rock is like the gold standard for the shorts, black and tan. So Space Rock on the bottom, Furry Buddy on the top. Who doesn't love a good black and tan? You get a little stout, transition to brown, you clean up with a pale ale. It's all great.
Joe, I was wondering if you could touch on 2 things. One is kind of a look back into history with the Imperial Beer Series, which kind of was an eye-opening thing for me personally, and then also kind of the transition point to what you see in terms of the future, what trends you're going towards, what you see in the future for shorts.
All right, very good question. So Imperial Beer Series, like just about it. I'm sorry, I was trying to.
Yeah, just kind of what your thinking was in terms of doing that. Did you know it would become such an important thing, and or maybe I'm overstating its importance even. But things like Carib Stout and all this kind of stuff. I drank these beers and was just blown away personally, and it just always made me seek out the next new thing that Shorts was doing.
Yeah, so for me, the Imperial Beer Series was a really important part of our career as a brewery, and for me personally, we did this in 2007, which was like right before we started entertaining the idea of a production facility, and this is back, we weren't making any money. I think the first year we made money, which would have been maybe 2007. Is that we made like $30,000, and then I'd spent it all on bottles for the Imperial Beer Series. But being from where we were, right, in a really sleepy town that every year was kind of sink or swim for us. We didn't really know if we were going to keep surviving, and I was like, I got to put it all out there. And so every month, I focused on a beer, and then I was going to work up to this epic release to be like, here it is, folks. We put it all out there. We spent like all the money that we made that year. I put it into this project, and it was like this is where we're going with beer. And it was important for a lot of reasons. One, in an increasingly popularized market, we needed to be noticed, and it's really hard to be noticed back then in our demographic. And 2, the importance of creating, taking beer to the next level. Like, so it wasn't just the liquid inside, it was the presentation, it was the story behind it, it was what inspired it. And that's what all those hang tags are. And I wrote every single one of those, and they were all deeply personal to me. And that's why I hand signed and hand numbered every one of them. And then I hand built wooden crates for all of these to fit in. And I made 13 and not 12, just in case one didn't work out. So, but we ended up with a full 13. And this was just a ridiculously crazy time for us. So when the time came for us to release and have this party, like I put press releases out. So Imperial Beer Dinner, 13 beers, 13 courses, $35 at the pub. And this was back when Leah and I lived in an apartment above Lulu's, which is a restaurant down the street from us. Like I mentioned earlier, we put everything that we had into this, like all of our resources. This was like big money, no whammies, right? And as we were putting this event together, it was like, we got to have food. You know, we really got to have food. These beers are just going to be blowing people. So we did. And then we brought in a friend, John Ingham, who was a bartender at Stella's at the time, the Grand Traverse Commons restaurant, and Woj and Leah. And I remember Leah basically doing an all-nighter to do the oatmeal raisin cookies that we needed for, what beer was it? Maybe the Publican Porter? And it was like literally like a the Hail Mary. We were trying to get all of the cards signed, and I was like, this is it. We're gonna have 100 people in the pub, and through every beer, I was up on the stage and I did a slideshow that walked you through, and I documented each beer that I had made. I was like, here's the spruce needles, and here's the honey that we got, and here's the tomatoes and the ginger. And like, I really wanted people to experience this fully from start to finish. And I was really excited because I was like, man, we're going to sell, these cases of beer at the end, and it's all going to pay off. Like these custom wood crates with a custom wood branded Shorts logo on it. And we sold like 25 bottles of beer.
Oh no.
Oh my God, what was wrong with these people?
So it like took us like 2 years to actually finally sell them all. And it was still hand signing and numbering cards every month, to just keep the stock going. But I mean, that's the level of ambition and tenacity that we had as a small brewer to really just, swing for the fences. And it's just, I don't know, even it's magical for me to even think about now, like just how hard we worked to create, it wasn't to like make money, it was to create this experience, but we did need to capture those resources back so we could continue going. And to me, that really just embodies sort of the personality of who we are as an organization. Like we're really willing to put it all out there if we believe in it, and if we believe it's going to generate a positive experience, because it did. It was we had a wave. So about halfway through the beer dinner, there was a wave. Like everybody stood up and did the wave around the dining room. Yeah, such a special thing to reflect on. It was quite magical.
Well, that makes it even more important to me. From afar, I wasn't at that dinner, but man, I wish I was. But experiencing it, I had a few of them, and I just had to seek out others and just try as many of them as I could. So I noticed the effort and the creativity that went into it. So thank you.
No, thanks for noticing. It was funny because these were all hand filled and hand crowned, and we didn't have a lab or anything. And I think it was 2 years ago, somebody brought me a spruce pilsner, the first one that we had ever done, and it was amazing.
They all aged beautifully.
It was absolutely amazing. It blew my mind. I was like, wow, that's, you're just thinking like it's just gonna be the worst thing ever and totally embarrassed. But it was the opposite. I was like, it really filled my heart and made me feel good about, being a brewer and making those beers.
What a great story. Thank you for telling it. And, you showed us your passion, but I got to tell you, there's an expression in the pesky wine business, is it in the glass? And these beers are in the glass, meaning they're good. And this is, coming from a wine palate, but they sure bear examination. Travis, you got me. Thank you for pulling Joe into doing this. What's coming up next? Like Travis asked you, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So for us,
Imagining, yeah.
we don't like to, I guess, close any doors. We're trying to keep open-minded here, but being almost so we're 17 and a half years old. So big thing for us is to try to and on that note, we've done a ton of growth, since 2004. So we're really focused on keeping true to our core values. Like we want to make the beers that we want to make. We want to drink the beers that we want to share with our family and friends. We want to harness the creative approach, and we want to provide great experiences through our I say products of passion, because that goes from like short, smart, merchandise to food at the pub to beers that we're sending out to the world and events that we're having. And, so it's food and beer. It should be fun. So we want to have fun, but we also are getting older now. So we're very cognizant of the fact that in this new world, consumers really dictate which directions we go sometimes. And, there's 150 mortgages. I think about this sometimes as 150 mortgages that we need to watch out for. So it's very important that we have a healthy, strong, strategic business model going forward. We're paying down debt, and we're being really strategic about capital expenses. But again, the core for us is make stuff, have fun, and make a difference. I think that's the biggest thing. Is like, can we have fun, do what we want to do, and make a difference in the world? And that's where I want to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're at 7:30 now. So if anyone wants to sign off, feel free to. Madeline has the next tasting to introduce. And then if you want to stick around and just chat and enjoy some more beers and swap some more stories, feel free. Madeline, you want to share your screen real quick and tell us about the next tasting?
Yep, I got it right here. Here we go. We're going from Shorts beer to Galicia in Spain. Yay. And this lady, Nuria, is, you'll like her story, Joe, I think, because she's actually an engineer and came to Michigan because of the car industry. But she, her heart lies with wine in Spain, so she started an import company. And most of her producers are small family-owned and operated, not just in Galicia, but throughout Spain. And she's going to be there next week for her vacation. She's going to call in from there, and we're going to do it on Friday at 4:00. And the reason we do that is because I figure people get off work a little bit earlier on Friday. They don't mind doing that. And 4:00 is her 10 p.m. So I didn't want to keep anybody anybody up too late. I once had a crazy Italian winemaker who happily stayed up till 1:00 in the morning, but he was a little blurry, So I asked a question, actually. I'm going to hang, if y'all don't mind, I should, show up. Oops, sorry. I asked a question about the beer at the pub. Is that Leah? Is that you? Is that other people? And what are your favorite foods from the pub?
It started with Leah and myself largely, and we used to change the menu almost every year. And finally I was like, wait, let's just keep things simple and pull all the greatest favorite items from the past 4 years and make the greatest hits. And because all the menu items are named after Wayne songs, it made sense to do a greatest hits album.
Oh.
And so on that note, I guess my point is you can't go wrong with any food because they're all great. They're basically the cream of every version of crops we've ever had. But I will say, prior to this tasting, I went to the pub and I got the beers that we were going to have, and I got pretzels. Love pretzels, but pretzels with spent grain and Short's Locals Light beer mustard and Soft Parade jam and peanut butter and Huma Lupa soft cheese.
The
Good.
soft cheese and the pretzel sounds killer.
But the sandwiches, I mean, you can't go wrong. White Peppers, our #1 selling sandwich. I'm personally a fan of the Sketches of Winkle, which is kind of like the Italian. But yeah, I think it goes without saying the Shorts pub food is just as good. The talent and the inspiration behind the pub food is just as good as the talent and the inspiration behind the beer. They are killing it over there, and yeah, it's really amazing. I think we provide probably some of the. I would be as adventurous to say as I think that eating at Shorts is probably one of the best places you could probably eat in Antrim County.
Field trip.
Yeah, speaking of field trip, yeah, you have 2 different facilities up there. You have Star Cut. So if you want to touch on any upcoming events you have for people to come visit.
Yeah, so no events per se in the queue right now, just because we're kind of in regroup mode, but we did launch the production facilities year-round tasting room in late February. So that's really exciting. And Leah's running that show now, which is awesome. So that year-round component is going to be interesting for us because we've never done a year-round thing in Elk Rapids. But Elk Rapids is in Antrim County, as well as Bel Air. And I think right now we're just we're getting ready to be fully open and try to keep inventory levels high to get through this summer, because we know that everybody's going to be wanting to let loose and are thirsty with all of this hot weather. But it'll probably come fall, we'll, after the dust settles a little bit from the intensity of reopening and everything getting crazy, we'll revisit the world of events. But if you find yourself at the pub or the pole barn in Elk Rapids, that's an event. We're happy to have you and want you to experience, who we are and what we do.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Joe and Tom and Pauline and everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Very honored to be the inaugural brewery here. Good luck. The
Woo,
rest
woo.
of that wine, the next wine thing was pretty sweet too. So
Yeah.
We definitely appreciate it and have loved working with Plum Market for many years now. You guys are a wonderful